Ethereum's been rallying lately, sometimes even faster than Bitcoin in the short term. It's got people asking whether the two should be viewed as peers or whether they're on completely different paths. Today, we're going to unpack Ethereum's value claims, how those claims compare to Bitcoin's sound money attributes, and where the differences matter the most. Hi, I'm Nate Martin, and this is the Bitcoin Effect. For my regular viewers, don't worry, I haven't gone off the rails here. I'm still a Bitcoiner, and that hasn't changed. But with all the attention Ethereum's been getting lately, new ETFs, Cathie Wood claiming it's more decentralized than Bitcoin, and institutional interest climbing, it's worth laying out a side-by-side comparison for anyone who's heard of both and wants an honest look at how they stack up. Now, I should be clear about one thing. My bias as a Bitcoiner is probably going to leak through in this comparison. If you've been around my channel for any period of time, then you probably already know which way I'm going to point you. But regardless of the price action, the news, or the noise when you've happened upon this video, the goal here is to give you a lasting framework so you can understand how Ethereum's value claims measure against Bitcoin's foundation as sound money. Ethereum is often presented as infrastructure, a base layer for recording contracts, assets, and governance. Vitalik Buterin, Ethereum's co-founder, has even called it a world ledger, a phrase meant to be easier to grasp than its original world computer branding. Its token is called Ether, often referred to by its ticker symbol ETH. Ether is the money inside the system. To run applications or do anything on Ethereum, you have to pay transaction fees called gas, and those fees are consumed, permanently removed from circulation. And that makes Ether act more like oil than gold. It's a commodity you burn up in use, not something you'd hold or use as money. If you're staking, which is similar to locking up funds in a bank CD, you can earn yield while helping to secure the network. Staking is what allows validators to process transactions and propose new blocks. Bitcoin, on the other hand, wasn't designed as infrastructure for other applications. It was designed to be money itself, a monetary protocol with a fixed supply. Every transaction fee in Bitcoin is paid in Bitcoin, but those coins don't disappear. They go to miners as compensation for securing the network. And unlike Ether, Bitcoin isn't consumed in the process. It keeps circulating, and every coin remains as durable as the next. And that's a fundamental difference. Ethereum treats its currency as fuel to be burned, while Bitcoin treats its currency as money to be preserved. And the differing philosophies for each of these currencies is a function of the differences in how each network was designed. Ethereum was built for flexibility, with rules that are frequently changed to handle new use cases. On the other hand, Bitcoin was built for stability, keeping its base layer simple and predictable. And in Ethereum's case, when you keep changing the foundation, it's not just the projects built on it that face risks. The more often you introduce updates, the greater the chance that the new code could create unintended consequences. And that's not to say Bitcoin upgrades are risk-free. Taproot is still controversial. But changes to Bitcoin are rare and slow, which minimizes those risks. But with the frequency of updates to Ethereum, eventually the people guiding those upgrades, the core developers, the Ethereum Foundation, and the biggest stakeholders, may have to face difficult governance choices. And that's not just theory. Ethereum's already been through it, and it's happened at one of the most defining moments in Ethereum's history. Before we move on, if you're finding this breakdown helpful, make sure to like, subscribe, leave me a comment, and click the notification bell so you don't miss the next episode. And if you'd like to be more active in our community, head over to thebitcoineffect.io. You can even leave me a voicemail with your thoughts. And keep an eye out for Bitcoin-only sponsors that you can support. That kind of backing helps me keep the show going, and it means a lot. So in 2016, a smart contract was launched on Ethereum called the DAO. It was supposed to be a decentralized venture fund, but it had a flaw in the code that let someone drain millions of Ether. Now, this wasn't a hack of Ethereum itself. The blockchain worked exactly as designed. The transactions were valid, they followed the rules of the code, and they were recorded on the ledger. But Ethereum's leadership didn't like the outcome, so they made a choice. Roll back the chain to undo those transactions and restore the funds. Well, that solved the immediate problem, but it came at a cost. It broke two of the most important promises of a blockchain. Immutability, the idea that history can't be rewritten, and censorship resistance, the idea that no one gets to decide which valid transactions count. The fallout was so huge that it split the chain in two. The original chain, the one that stuck with immutability and censorship resistance, kept going as Ethereum Classic. The altered chain, the one that rolled back history, became what we now know as Ethereum. And here's the irony. The chain that kept the promises was sidelined. The one that abandoned them took on the Ethereum brand. And that's not to say that Bitcoin hasn't faced its own crises in early development, but it has never rewritten its history to undo valid transactions. And when a system can be rolled back like it was after the DAO, it shows that someone had the power to make that call, which raises a bigger question. How decentralized is Ethereum really? Because some people, even big names like Cathie Wood, have argued that it's more decentralized than Bitcoin. But decentralization can mean two very different things. Decentralization of validation, who gets to add blocks, and decentralization of governance, who gets to decide the rules themselves. On the validation side, Bitcoin splits the work. Miners compete to add blocks, but every full node double checks those blocks against the rules. And if miners try to push something invalid, the nodes can reject it. Well, that way, validation isn't concentrated in the hands of a few. Ethereum works differently. To validate, you stake Ether. The more you stake, the more often you're picked to propose or approve blocks. And that means validation is tied directly to wealth. But what about governance? In Bitcoin, developer proposals can't just be rushed in. It usually takes years of debate, discussion, testing, and eventually broad consensus across the nodes before any change makes its way into the protocol. And that influence comes from running a node, regardless of how much or how little Bitcoin you might own. And that separation of roles means governance is enforced from the bottom up. By contrast, Ethereum updates come more frequently, often driven by the foundation and the largest stakeholders. And it's those same stakeholders who dominate validation by staking the most Ether. So the very people proposing or approving blocks are also the ones steering the rules that govern those blocks. It may be branded as community consensus, but the reality is that it's a rather exclusive community. Ethereum supporters argue that adaptability is a strength, that being able to update quickly makes the system more useful. But adaptability in Ethereum often means rewriting parts of the foundation. Well, that's not durability, that's reinvention. We've already talked about those risks. Bitcoiners see strength in something different: anti-fragility. Bitcoin has faced shocks that could have crippled lesser systems: exchange collapses, government bans, and even China shutting down all of its mining. Each time, participants could adapt to their circumstances knowing that the network and their money was not going to change. And that's why anti-fragility is so valuable. While Ethereum adapts by reinventing itself, Bitcoin refuses to be swayed. Because under stress, wouldn't you rather be able to adjust to your circumstances knowing that your money is still going to be the same? So where does that leave us? Its advocates see the Ethereum platform as a programmable settlement layer. Infrastructure for everything from decentralized finance to NFTs to digital governance. In their view, Ethereum is a world ledger where applications and activity create the demand that drives value. On the other side, Bitcoiners view Bitcoin differently, as sound money, scarce, secure, and reliable for decades. And for those of us who want their money to just be money, that's enough. That's it for this edition of the Bitcoin Effect. If you've enjoyed this video, don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit that notification bell so you don't miss the next one. We'll see you next time.